go ahead and get started here. So, not sure if these mics are working or if we need the mics in this room. Everyone in the back, good? All right. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I guess our last panel member did not show. Brad Draco, I'm the IndoPACOM J68 and also the program manager for IndoPACOM MPE. And so appreciate everybody turning out today. It's quite a turnout for this side of the room. So hopefully we get some really great participation. Just for a quick format here, since it is small and informal, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to have the panel members introduce themselves, get a quick, give them their quick thoughts on the topic, which is MPE Expeditionary data-centricity, and then we'll go ahead and hopefully get a lot of audience participation from a group this size. Just one thought from myself before we get rolling is, when I looked at this topic and I looked at MPE in general, I think this is the third MPE session for this AFCEA, so trying to make this one a little bit different. We'll see how we achieve that goal, but the expeditionary part of this is what sticks out to me. From an IndoPACOM perspective, where I spend a lot of my time focused on, right, is really what I consider fighting up and out battles that are more strategic in nature and more, if you're understanding how the U.S. Department of Defense has sort of arrayed this problem at the enterprise and expeditionary level, more focused really on trying to define and understand the strategic level and how we're going to tie in with our partners, and less focused really looking down and in and how we do the data centricity part of this and sharing with from the operational and tactical level. And so we've got a great panel from our components here assembled. With that, I hope that's the last thing I have to say in this meeting, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, my name is Meredith Fonseca. Not super loud, so hopefully you can hear me. I'm a government civilian. I work at USARPAC, so U.S. Army Pacific, serving as their chief data officer. And some of you are going, well, that's kind of interesting. You have a data section standalone from your G6. So we're made up of 3 teams. We have data governance, knowledge management, just kind of focused on really enterprise data exclusive to our headquarters, and data visualization. And then we also have an analytics division. And recently we did an AI/ML summit at USARPAC, and we took a look at this exact problem. We said, wait a minute, what are we going to do when we're asked in a joint combined fight to share data with our partners? What does that look like? We spend a lot of time talking about an Army Pacific data fabric, but we don't spend a ton of time talking about how we do that across the partners. So I'm also really looking forward to learning from our sister service and allied partners. We've been talking about data centricity, both expeditionary but also operational and strategic, and we start with literacy. Do we have a common vernacular, and do we have literacy surrounding data? Does everybody who is an authoritative data owner understand the handling policies between mission partners? Do we have those agreements in place? Do we all have an agreed upon understanding of how we implement zero trust? I give you this hand signal right now to say that's yeah. So this is why it's a really great dialogue, and I'm also looking forward to learning and hearing from you guys. How are we going to meta tag all of this data, the descriptors, the adherence to these pre-negotiated data sharing agreements? Our team is talking about that. We don't have the answers, but we need help coming up with those answers. In this AI/ML summit, we also acknowledge that in addition to that, we have to appropriately classify data. As the government, as the owners of this data, we need to classify it, and we are very constrained by foreign disclosure. There's kind of this huge funnel that then bottlenecks at an FDO. And so we took a hard look at how do we apply technologies in the machine learning space, maybe that's LLMs, into assisting us in automating foreign disclosure. And I think those are really important steps. So looking forward to learning more. I've been at USARPAC for 4 months, so please make a point to reach out to me on LinkedIn or link up if there's relevance with your organization. I look forward to that. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much. Colonel Wade Morris, Australian Army. So currently I work within our CIO's area. I'm responsible for the delivery of our basically our new data-centric network. So replacing all our network-centric environments that Australia is currently reliant upon. We're moving those forward to data centricity. So really, critical to this honest conversation. Where I come from previously, I was Army's G6 in my previous role, so very much focused on that tactical, expeditionary, deployed side of data-centricity and how we get about working with our coalition partners. I was in a brief this morning on Talisman Sabre where the lady who sat up front said, we will never fight alone. Australia can never fight alone. And so for us, it's very much a case of how do we get that fight tonight capability. Again, I'm going to draw back to the excellent presentation that came out from this morning in a couple of my opening points, if I may. So the first point is that how do we do that fight tonight? How do we build our networks to the relevant standards, to the relevant policies, so that we can deploy expeditionary, tactically, operationally as a coalition, and from day one be in a position to fight. From day one be in a position to exchange those core information exchange requirements of voice, email, chat, collaboration, COP, VTC. This morning the discussion, which was very good, they said, look, we were dead on it. We got in, we did a year's planning and 30 days to establish the network. That doesn't sound overly flight tonight. Now that is still incredibly quick from my experience, and having been in the G6 for a number of years, it can take us more than 30 days. Usually during a Talisman Sabre activity that I was in the G6 for, J6 for, we may not have achieved it by the end of the exercise, so that's never particularly good. So for me, it's very much the standards, it's very much the processes, it's very much making sure we all understand how we're going to integrate and operate at that system level. We don't need the same technologies. I think it's healthy if we don't necessarily have the same technology stacks, but having that interoperability at the system boundary, that's critical. So that'd be my number one. The second point, again, one of the young gentlemen briefing this morning said, his perspective, we've already got all the pieces for data centricity, and we probably do. It's a case of sticking them together in the right place and in the right the context we use is data at the point of need. So having all our data held in an enterprise, help the enterprise would potentially be industry best practice. Hold it all in a cloud infrastructure and access that data as required. That's brilliant if you've got access to that cloud infrastructure, if you've got a gigabits per second data link to access it. Usually a young soldier, sailor or aviator, certainly the aviators who are sat down in a foxhole somewhere operating off a deployed tactical data centric environment, maybe operating over kilobits per second. So having that meshed data fabric, having that data available at the point of need to enable the warfighter is really critical from my perspective. Final 2 points is we very much see that what we will deploy initially, and our sort of initial time periods in the 2025 operational deployment, what we will see deployed initially will not look the same 12 months later. When I was, old stories, when I was a CO with one of our regiments 4 years ago, I had an operating environment where my soldiers weren't born, but that operating environment was deployed. We were still running Windows XP. And I had soldiers who hadn't been born when Windows XP first rolled out. That didn't make me feel particularly old, but under the data-centric networks and under the way we need to work together, having a DevSecOps framework in place, which means we're constantly evolving as threat and as technology evolves, is critical. We can't be operating off Windows XP in 2019, which is unfortunately what we were doing. And final point from me is very much Australia can't do this on our own. We're currently working very closely with Indo-PACOM to basically steal their homework, and very closely with the rest of our partners to steal their homework. But it's also a case of working with industry. As I said, I don't think we will ever have nor do we want, common technology, common hardware, common software stack across the environments. We want those standards, we want the relevant integration, relevant interoperability points. If we go, for my opinion, if we go for a standard hardware, software, whatever it may be, that although it can give us a single point of defend, it can also give us a single point of failure. Those of you that follow Australian news, which I can't imagine is many of you, we had an outage on one of our major telco providers for the last 48 hours, where I think it was 45% of the Australian population lost all internet and all mobile phone connectivity. So my Netflix bill will be a bit less this month, but that single point of failure is something I think we need to be cautious of moving forward. Ray, over to you.
All right, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray Dia, and I'm the Deputy A65 for Headquarters TACAP, which is the Strategy, Plans, and Integration. Right? I'm really excited about this topic because the way I view it, when it comes to data centricity, to me, it's the end state. Right? How we get there, what we do now, basically plays a huge role in how we really apply that. I think we can all agree here that when we do engage in a conflict, we won't be fine by ourselves, right? Our ability to be able to communicate, whether from a C2 perspective, whether from a logistical standpoint, or even where, like, just communicating where families renting groups are, is really critical. Having this ability. But how do we get there, right? I think data centricity is our target. So there are certain things that we need to address prior to getting to that point, right? And I'm not going to go into the details, so we can have a back and forth kind of discussion, because this is more towards for you guys. The way I view it, like industry, is a force multiplier. We as a service member are very limited in capacity, and we have other things that we are prioritized to, we are ordered to prioritize, and we are engaging with, right? So as we move forward and as we do this discussion, I encourage everyone to ask difficult questions, because that's the only way we can highlight our limiting factors, highlight our pain points, and as well as get everyone on the same page. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Colonel Miller.
Hi everybody doing? Lieutenant Colonel Curtis Miller, Marine Forces Pacific. I'll say don't ask me the hard questions. Unless these guys are hard questions. I'm in the G6/G39 at Mark 4 PAC. We have within Commander Mark 4 PAC has 2 MEFs under us. 1 MEF primarily on the West Coast, 3 MEF primarily in the Pacific. And we're at a place now where they're having to work a lot more together than they have in times past. That interoperability, just internal to our service, has been challenging. We've had a lot of meetings and conferences and summits to talk about how we just talk internal to the Marine Corps. So then when you add on that, how do we talk to our naval partners? Then how do we talk to our joint partners? Oh yeah, we have mission partners and coalition partners we have to talk to too. Talking across these different environments becomes very challenging. And so for the Marine Corps, we're very focused on the micro-tactical level. We want that warfighter at the very tactical edge to be able to sense something, to be able to share that information to a trigger puller, get that information over to them, and then send rounds downrange. And so that's our focus is, at the H2, at the operational level, strategic level, we know some of these guys are thinking about that and working those things out. But for the Marine Corps, we're very interested at that micro-tactical level. What do we have to push all the way down to the very forward edge to ensure that that sensing data can get to that trigger? So that's the perspective.
All right. Thank you all for introducing yourself. I know I said I wasn't going to speak much, but I can't help myself on one point that Colonel Morris brought up, which is one size fits all doesn't help anybody, right? I think that's when I reference some of the challenges and sites that we've been having at a sort of a policy strategic level. That's too much time spent on just trying to determine what's important and what we should try to do. The standards, the tools, that's what's important. That's what we all need to agree on and work towards. In my opinion, that's Red Rainbow's opinion. Leave the material solutions and the building of that to be able to do that vast majority of the services. I know myself, great point, appreciate that. So, my priority is participation. Brave soul. All right, man.
Who's taking ownership of labels, black codes, data labels, data? Who's taking ownership of how it's going to be shared, who's labeling the data itself?
So,
I think this is why we need to agree upon policy.
yeah, I think you're highlighting, if I'm understanding your question right, an issue of responsibility, right? Who's got this responsibility in an enterprise and not in an enterprise, but then we got multiple, in this room I can see, multiple mission partners. That's a gap from my perspective. I don't know if anybody else has a thought on that, but that, could point to maybe a couple of, within the Department of Defense, a couple of agencies that exist, or people organizations, PCO may be one of those. What that is today, I don't know, or what they're going to be in the future. But from my perspective, that is a gap that exists from a policy level perspective. One of the things that we pushed out, we've been pushing in that messaging from an take-on perspective is, hey, let the enterprise focus on what enterprise does best, which is doing things exactly like what you're identifying, right? Let's identify standards, let's identify policies, leave the material solutions to others, help us where we need to help. That's what I agree with. I don't know if you really
Look, I fully agree with you, Rose, Brad. It's having that clear articulation of how you want to interact at the system band is critical. So, if you say, well, we're going to interact with VMF, it's going to be our mechanism of exchanging POI data. Everyone agree, put it in a, make it a part of the standard of FMN Spark 4, is VMF. But that's really, from my eyes, that's where it's got to reside. It's got to reside at a standard that is a minimum 5 eyes, well, it's a minimum AUKUS would agree to, then ideally 5 eyes, and then optimally NATO and NATO affiliate countries. NATO Australia's not in the North Atlantic, but is an affiliate country. So personally, I'd like to see it sit within the NATO FMN spiral specification. Specify that that's the label tagging we're going to have as a minimum metadata. Same as with my identity. This is the minimum identity credentials that you can have, be it 8, 10, 15 attributes. And personally, that's where I'd like to see it sat. The bigger group that agrees on it, the better. So AUKUS is a minimum 5 Rs, range for NATO and NATO affiliate nations.
I'd like to chip in on this one because that question is really important, right? Because who's responsible for what are the set of standards? I think before we can even get to that point, it's more like a walk, crawl, run type approach, right? What I mean about it, right, we're looking at it from a data centricity standpoint. One, we need to be able to lay down the foundation of where that data is going to rest, right? Currently, if you look at your data, you'll have data in your QML system, you have data in your weapon system, you have data in agencies, you have data in your at some point, there are some level of federation in there, right? MTD's doing a really big job federating those networks and increasing visibility. But in my opinion, if I were to dictate the framework that would work in approaching this data centricity and standard, is one, I would create an open architecture platform. If you think about it in this room, you have cell phones where you can do banking, you can do grocery, you can pretty much do everything or you need, right? With one single platform. From a warfighter perspective, that's what we want, right? Once that you're at the edge, you need intel, whether it's weather, whether it's friendly or located, assets in the air and the sea. That kind of situational awareness empowers individuals where how we get there is a journey. We talk about hey, data security what shapes us? Okay? Technology. Technology can shape your human behavior, which will drive how you interact with each other. Right? You lay down that foundation of technology that will drive that culture change, right? And be able to harness that. The second piece is like from an open architecture approach is identity. Identity access management is so critical. As I alluded earlier, we're not going to fight by ourselves. We're going to fight with our partners. We're going to fight with our allies. We're all going to fight together. Having that clarity as to who has access to what and when they can access that data is really important. And that's driven by the attributes to your profile that you present when you try to go access the information. Because remember, from a zero trust perspective, that security is no longer determined. It's all going to go down to files. So having the right access and identity to access that file based on the warfighter's needs, based on their time, space, and situation, is critical. So that's second. Third point. Your question was gonna be responsible for the visibility of data, right? Before you can have visibility of data, you have to validate that data. You can have access to it. Once that you have visibility of the data, then you can manage the information that you have and secure it based on whatever it is. Okay? And then once that you have those foundations, now you can present and leverage AI and machine learning. Right? You have the data, you know how to manage it, you have visibility on the things that the warfighter needs. Now, when they move forward, then you can start, filling the layer and providing what's important to that warfighter. Right? Pilot need, to be able to see the targets. They need to be able to find, fix, track, right? And when they engage, they need to be able to assess. So having that information in almost real time is critical, right? So we live in an era where architecturally is great, right? But the fundamental problem is being able to provide clarity as to how we can access key information. And I think we need to understand that, from a policy perspective, we're always going to have issues with that. We're just gonna have to go through that. But working towards that state, which is data centricity, is important, and this is where industry can help us. Industry has the capacity and the resources to be able to accelerate some of the things that we're actually experiencing, right? With implementation, we're actually building a bank. So with that, hopefully that kind of provides a little bit of clarity. When we talk about visibility, when we talk about data centricity, it's not as like one-for-one kind of thing, but it's a process. It's a multi-layered problem that we as a group need to come together and keep having these conversations so that one, we can highlight the issues and the pain points, and then we can work together.
So data centricity, what you're looking at, are you looking at like a TNE, sub-trusted network environment like Centcom has, where you have all these other networks coming into it? Or you're looking at your mission network, where they're all going to be part of that network? Is it a multi-network, or is it what's the data centricity? It's got to be core. That data centricity. So what's that?
Okay, I'll take that. So, all right. At some point, we're going to have to kind of change our mindset or change our views when it comes to this.
I'm ready for that.
Right? So, if we look at things that, we're going to be able to access the data using a network, I think we have to move away from that. Open architecture is out there, right? Having a standard on how we access this information is what we need. What does that mean? that information doesn't have to rely from a data, right? From a PACAP perspective, we are moving forward. We're accelerating our efforts and bringing everyone that we can engage with as far as like leveraging hybrid computing or hybrid architecture. So what does that give us, right? So having data available to us that is that we can cache over a certain period of time allows us to be in a disconnected state, right? You're able to operate within a disconnected state for a certain period of time, then your survivability is a lot higher than. Yeah, so like perfect, right? So and I think that's from a Navy standpoint, right? You know, we the Air Force should also leverage some of the lessons learned that once that you're afloat, you're out there.
Yeah, we can't run away at 60,000 miles per hour.
Oh, absolutely.
We just take it.
Yeah, so I think like, you know, from a network standpoint, we need to be able to make sure that the data is available. I think that's the first step. Yeah. So and having that data live in a platform where it can be accessed whether, you know.
That's what
Yeah, so whether you're in an isolated state or connected in the earth, right? It's really important. To me, that would be a cloud solution. Okay? High-tech cloud solution. Okay? So that's how I.
So we're talking just back on that question real quick, because again, from a micro tactical perspective, we're anticipating we're not always going to be able to get to that strategic cloud, that strategic data center. So we're anticipating there's going to be data at different levels, the strategic, the operational, the tactical level. Right? You talked about being able to get to data from your phone. There's data also stored on your phone. So what we relate to that is like the tactical processing node. You're going to have your necessary data on that node, but being able to sync up with the cloud for AI, ML, and all these other, cloud type capabilities to be able to manage and manage that.
But you don't need to sync with the cloud to have that. So you can have an edge device.
Correct.
So as long as your compute is there, it just depends on how strong the marine back is.
So it's got to be small, right? But to your point, so we anticipate being cut off from that enterprise. So if there's other environments, for example, we have a Marine Corps enclave down at the tactical level, and our Australian partners have their tactical thing down at that level. We can't always be able to reach up into the cloud and talk, right? We got to be able to communicate laterally. And so that's one of the things that as we move toward that centricity, we got to make sure those policies talk.
You'll see that commonality for land forces and the Army too, making that same investment for forward disconnected huge and with personal capacity. The same thing. You'll see the same thing in the OTAC nodes with all of that.
Brand new.
Hi, yes. So we're going to support the comm on this whole mission partner environment and want to do a rehearsal and a battle on how we would fight. That means we do joint exercises, right? And so if we do joint exercises, aside from this flexible architecture, you have the JMAT that's with the CDAO, right, providing the data and giving you guys guidance on how to leverage AI. And then you've got the new DoD metadata guidance, right, that tells you how you're supposed to tag the data. But our mission partners don't have the same data standardization. And you've got the J6, right, trying to develop the IMN, the Indo-PACOM Mission Network. But who is the systems integrator, the CTO, responsible to ensure that Australia, when we move away from bilateral exercises to multilateral exercise, who is the system integrator for AI, for that data standardization on that, tactical joint fires network? So that we can rehearse and fight.
I'll kick us off. That's a really good question, and it's kind of a glaring capability gap. Coming with beginner's eyes to the theater, having been in this role for 4 months, I asked very similar questions, and the the more people I ask those questions to, the more I learn how complicated it is to address. We don't have NATO stronghold, right, with the mission partners that are here. We have sometimes bespoke agreements that are bilateral, and then they have to be customized with the next bilateral agreement because there are peculiar sensitivities, in each individual case. I think we honor that needs to be done, and that as we do these exercises, we keep learning more and more and more about how the integration is needed. I don't think we've designated that I know of an executive agent who takes charge of that, and I don't think at the end of it we're going to see ourselves with a common standard. I think it is going to be bespoke partner to partner. I mean, you'll see the bye-bye for obvious reasons, but I think when it comes to some of our other mission partners, it will probably be unique, would be my assessment right now, just from the diversity of folks that I've been kind of asking. But I'm really interested in how you all view this. And, I think one thing that's glaring to me is we don't have a lot of time to get this in order, right? There's a real sense of urgency for this theater, and so we're constantly doing these exercises. To your point, they are our rehearsals and learning and documenting, so we have to iteratively, very quickly spiral those things into policy, but also into implementation, and that's.
So one of the issues we have at the moment is when we deploy on exercise and we exercise together as part of a coalition, joint interagency, quite often, we'll deploy our networks, and that'll be the first time we'll have turned them on for 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, they're not
persistent. They're episodic.
Yes.
We need to get to the phase where they are
They're
persistent.
Yeah.
They're persistently in place. Australia is moving to a position where our deployed IMN equivalent, JC2net, that'll be the network that we will use in barracks as well as deployed. So it'll have a different implementation in barracks.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be tailored to meet industry best practice in barracks, and then tailored to meet maneuver best practice when we deploy, because those things are not the same. Very much as Curtis was saying, we know we need to operate in a D3IL environment. We know we need to operate at a narrow bandwidth, have that data at the point of need. But specifically back to your question, at the moment that function is executed episodically by the senior 6 in location, in effect, and we get members from each of the coalition to come in and support that fusion and integration at that integration point. We need to get away from that, and we need to get to the point where these networks are enduring, so that we can do that fight tonight. We can pick up, deploy, and they are good to go, and we know they're good to go, and they're proven good to go. We're not there at the moment, but I'm sure as Australia continues to copy America's homework, we will get there.
I think we can get there
more
quickly
questions.
with Australia.
All
But when it comes to the other partners, I think it gets harder.
Yes.
It gets much harder.
Yeah, for sure. Hello.
Stuart Wagner, I'm a civilian in the Air Force. Colonel Bladen, I think you've mentioned now a couple of times, fight tonight. I'm curious about the night after. Night after the start of the fight.
That's a good question.
How do you learn from operational theater data during competition with conflicts? Some ways to consider perhaps this question could be how do you learn and employ effects? Such effects may entail, this question for you, another one, may entail calibrating weapon systems, changing tactics, techniques, and procedures, changing or adjusting strategy to operational theater data, and changing the way we conduct exercises based on data. That's my question.
It was addressed to me, but I will pass to. I'm glad to say, in your question, you almost answered it. So, look, it is a great question, and I'll answer with. I'm not 100% sure what the answer would be. I think some of the challenges to achieving it are, we are within military very much a hierarchical organisation, a hierarchical beast that is slow to change at times. Hence, it took us a long time, in my opening comments, to move away from Windows XP. What we need to do with our evolving networks that are built upon a DevSecOps framework, that, as you say, as opportunities or changes to the environment appears, allows us to do changes to those changes to those networks. It allows us to rapidly deploy AI, ML, learning or engines or tool sets. Allows us to rapidly ingest tactical feeds at the tactical edge. So we're building our network specifically to be able to ingest tactical OT data from our FIRES networks, from FMV, etc. But we've got to be in a position where we can do that rapidly, dependent upon those partners that may turn up on the battlefield. So if I have Australia exercise a lot with Papua New Guineans, they actually come with some pretty capable off-the-shelf capabilities, and we need to be able to rapidly ingest those official classified networks or OT into our classified data-centric environments to allow us to get after that agile approach to warfighting. But I'm sure Curtis can answer it far more eloquently than I can.
I told you no hard questions. So no, that is a good question. I think we have to completely change our paradigm. I enlisted in '98, and back then I think we were still using DOS. And you know, we transitioned through Banyan Vines and a lot of different technologies, but the transitions were relatively slow. These days, transitions are happening much faster, and I can imagine it would only get exponentially faster as we move forward. We as the military service bureaucratically don't do things that well. We don't change that well. We've got to really change in a lot of areas to be able to keep up with the technology, so that as our adversaries are, you know, transitioning to newer technologies, we're not behind them in pace. We got to stay ahead in pace. We got to use all of the information power that we have, all of the military power, you know, diplomatic power. We got to use all these different levels of power to be able to stay ahead of what our adversaries are doing. So, I mean, you make a good point. I think you did answer your own question, but there's a lot of different areas where we're going to have to update our TTPs and our technologies at a very rapid rate.
I have two quick thoughts for you, Stuart. I think we need to invest in the right infrastructure, and we need to invest in the literacy to be able to do that at the scale and pace that we need to. So the stovepiped infrastructure is not going to allow us to do that in this mission partner joint environment. I think that's the first piece that's really powerful. And then the literacy. We have to be able to not grade our own homework, but be really honest with ourselves, and we have to actually have the literacy to do data-driven assessment and then rapidly conduct that agile process and trust it. You know, I have a background in unmanned systems through the years in robotics, and I remember presenting some senior leaders some approaches to conducting aerial ISR, right? Early drone days. And we're like, hey, sir, the machine learning model says the best way to conduct this reconnaissance of this specific location is to do this wazoo crazy pattern. And the aviator at the table says, no, Meredith, we do this oblong cigar-shaped sortie, right, that we're all familiar with. And the ranger at the table says, no, Meredith, we do this clover leaf. You know, you go out, you slide laterally, you go in. And I'm like, sir, this is the machine learning says that this is the way to decrease your acoustic signature to the adversarial site, your visual signature, your detect by radar systems. Can we trust the machine learning algorithm? Right? And so we have to get to a point of literacy where we have enough reps and sets, which is why we have to insert technology into exercises, into rehearsals. And we have to have that literacy, that trust, that common vernacular, I think. And then when we start using the agile process, we know it, we're responsive to it. It's just like a drill, you know, and we do it much faster. But I think it's infrastructure and I think it's literacy are really important.
And I think to the question that was asked, right, I mean, if we're all, this is the frustration that I've seen in the 2 years in my position here, right, or much of the 2 years is if, you know, the reason for not moving forward is that we're waiting for policy or we're waiting for somebody to be in charge or take something, right? So the challenge that I put to the Joint Staff and others that come to see us, right, is lead with, we're going to lead with the solution. If we get it wrong, tell us we're wrong and we'll go back and do it again, but lead with the solution. We can't just, you know, hang out waiting for somebody to come and tell us what the right answer is. And we can use exercises and events like that to prove out what we believe our solutions are. And I think that's an important thing
Not just to wait, right, but to move, be the first mover in that. More hands, sir.
Well, kind of similar to that point, I was just wondering from your perspective, especially you, Brad, we talk about how we're not going to fight alone, so I'm just curious if Indo-PACOM J69, I know Mr. Stevenson wasn't here, or Mr. Nicholson wasn't here.
He's still back there.
But,
He's still the tallest guy in the room.
Is Indo-PACOM trying to go after this from an interoperability standpoint with partners and allies in the region? Is that part of something that they do in the 6.9 as far as talking about data-centric?
Yeah, 100%. I think part of the way I look at it, right, so I'm 6'8", Frank Tyson, my partner in the 6'9", he's really more outreach and working with the partners and in more broad scope, quite honestly. There's a lot of partner interoperability challenges we have, not just in the data centricity, piece or the MPE space. There's a lot of challenges we have with working with allies and partners. And that's the 6.9's role, right, is to start closing those gaps. Where I see our role from an Indo-PACOM J68 perspective is to start bringing some of those solutions and bringing those technologies together and working with the partners here at this table to say, hey, do these all work together? Here's how I'm going to give you access. Here's how I'm going to give you a capability. And then let's go test that, right? Let's go make sure that works. But it's even more broad than that. I mean, you mentioned Mr. Nicholson. He's got a big job in being our executive director for coalition communications. That means a lot of things. It does not just mean the engagements and the systems we use. There's a big challenge in that. And Mr. Nicholson, I know you're here, so if you wanted to.
So I would absolutely agree that in the J6, working with the J5, working with the J7, working across the J areas, the Geographic Combatant Command is responsible for building those partnerships, right? Future Security Corporation is part of those partnerships. We are aligning, we are visiting with all of these partners, understanding their capacities and building cyber capacity, bringing our experimentation right into these partners where they don't have to have the same learning gap. They can learn from our learning process. So yes, we are engaging at various levels. And although some of these things we're talking about here today is complicated, do not assume because you don't understand it that is the gap. We are absolutely, DOD-CIO absolutely takes charge and raises their hand. They got the data tagging and standards, and they are running it with CDAO, and then passing it down with each of the services, big services, have a mission partner office where they have to engage laterally with their service from Army runs Project Convergence, and they have mission partner environment. Navy runs Overmatch. They have mission partner environment. Air Force has AMS. They have mission partner environment. So the services are engaging all of our mission partners at the service level. DOD is engaged. We have DASDs and all kinds of key leader engagements, doing engagements, and we're participating with them to do capacity building so they can understand where the U.S. is going so we can have equivalency and connecting our networks. So we're hitting this thing at least a half dozen levels up and down the chain to make sure our partners are involved. The exercise campaign that our J7 runs, extensive. These partners don't show up by accident. They're invited, they're told, we set our objectives, everyone is the 2, the 3, the 6, we're all jointly bringing these objectives in and then folding in experimentation to bring in parts of Sabre and IMN, we was all that Bold Quest, all these things. Again, guys, yes, a lot of moving parts, but don't assume there's a gap because you haven't heard that somebody's working on it, right? It's a lot that we have to pull together. We have to continue to ask great questions. But yes, we are engaging our partners. And when it comes to learning from leveraging the Federated Mission Network standards from NATO and that environment, we're pulling all of that over, right? It's not left out. All the things with that the minimum entry criteria standards and things being worked by FMN, which cuts across a ton of nations, all of that comes over as well. So it's not lost information. It is hard. It is challenging. But some of the things you think is a gap is not a gap.
So
Thanks, sir.
If I can add on to that, this is like more of like a new information. I'm pretty sure my leadership will, tell me like to not say it. But from a Department of the Air Force level, like I've been in this theater for about a year, and I've seen a lot of from a policy shortfall to resourcing to capturing the requirement and capturing what the capability requirement exists, right? I think, you know, just being transparent from one man's perspective is that we haven't really focused our attention to the key things that's really important, that is driven by the combatant command and the component command's priorities, right? So what I'm saying is that, you know, from the Department of the Air Force, I think that we are starting to get organized in such a way that we can provide clarity. When we start talking about standards on how we tag data, right? We're good at, you know, basically outlining the basic procedures, but not having the structure to support and institutionalize a procedure will eventually fail, right? And I think having having a group of folks communicating what pain points are and what structure we really need in order for us to promote that communication up and down, right? It is important. To your point, sir, right? You know, there's communication up and down, all 12 levels, right? And I think from a headquarters or MAGCOM, we have the responsibility to communicate that out to our units in order to provide a little bit more clarity, right? And from there on, like, you know, as other units communicate out to industry, then we'll have a level set kind of battle space, if that makes sense.
Okay, so
So I think what Brad said is, I think the U.S. might need to just lead that, like you say, come up with the structure, and then have everybody vote on it. So that's what we did in CENTCOM, is that all the countries got to vote and say, yes, we accept this, we didn't. But there was a structure there. The U.S. had to lead it, but you're going to have to lead it. It's going to have to be, we come up with it,
Well,
get everybody to vote on it, and
well, and again, I'll go back to some of my very first comments, right? We make a distinction between what's expeditionary,
yes.
operational to tactical,
Right.
and what's really enterprise, right? If we as warfighters are trying to solve what at their heart are enterprise problems, we're probably not working at the right level, right? So let's get
Preach it,
engaged
brother.
and make sure we understand who we're trying to solve those problems on our behalf, to the point that's made. Communicate my need up and out, right? How am I going to do that? And then who's going to support us at this level in doing that?
So, you know, I like what Ray said is that, you know, he's got his Department of the Air Force and then he's got his COCOM priorities. And the Marine Corps is kind of the same way. I often find times when I talk to my brethren at Marine Corps Systems Command or the Marine Corps Cyberspace Operations Group, they're not in lockstep with what we're doing within the theater. So how do we bridge the gap with what the service is doing and the trajectory that they're going on with what INDOPACOM is doing? So that's like a full-time job. We stay engaged. We got our 2 MEFs that come out every 6 months for our operational planning group, and we're sharing with them. We'll have INDOPACOM come in, we'll have USAPAC come in, have those conversations so they understand what's happening across the DoD, and then they're like, yeah, we want some of that. And so we've got to, you know, at Marfor PAC, we really try to make sure that we're bridging a gap on what the service is doing with our partners in the Beltway and what we're doing here in theater.
All right, so we've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to go one more question from this side of the room. I haven't been over here for a while. There were some hands up earlier. Who wants to go?
Okay. So I think I may have an unpopular opinion here.
Uh-oh. 3 minutes or less.
I think I disagree with your strategy, and I'll tell you why. I tried to find her, but the gal in the back mentioned that there was recent metadata standards that were agreed on by the DoD and that were published. I think that was relatively news to me. But I know for a fact, sitting in the actual meetings for the JADC2 group that actually came up with that data strategy around interoperability that would then feed into mission partner environments, it took them about 2.5 years to align on a minimal metadata standard when it came to user attributes that was already created and shared by the intelligence community and then sat on for 2.5 years. And I'll tell you the apprehension as to why they did not choose it is because they felt as though they might be speaking for the tactical needs at the enterprise and they might be missing something understood by the tactical. Whereas the counter, it sounds like tactical is saying, I'm not going to decide on something that should be an enterprise problem. I would actually argue the two of you need each other, because
Yeah.
we conduct enterprise
Yes.
mission using tactical resources.
Yes.
And we conduct tactical mission using enterprise resources. So I would offer a suggestion. Use a mission engineering thread, an actual use case within this AOR, as a means by which to articulate not just a capability tech
Yeah.
stack, which can be 1,000 different ones,
Yeah.
but to land on the actual standards around identity, credentialing, access
Yep.
management policies,
Yeah.
data tagging capabilities.
Yep.
So I would argue, I think you're more empowered to do and then share, and much like the rest of the world works, we don't all have to sit in a room and agree. We just have to share what we've been doing and make it extensible for people to either come with an alternative or a line.
100%. I don't think that's controversial at all. Yeah. Right? That is leading with that solution, right? Coming up with that, through that methodology, I think is exactly where we need to be. And we need to be pushing it. I think the person who asked the question earlier has departed, but that's what we do through our exercises and our events, right? That's how we prove that out. That's how we push that standard. Let somebody else tell us we're wrong or they don't agree, but let's push that up.
And just to add on, I agree with you, but I think where we've fallen behind is, since you look to industry to submit things,
Yeah.
the nuance that comes from the industry and then is even echoed by the government is actual products and technologies are articulated rather than the actual formats and structures and interfaces and specifications, right? So for you to emphasize those things, it then allows us to understand whether we're playing along or we're coming with our own one-off thing that isn't necessarily taking form.
Sure. Great. We are exactly at time, so I'm going to give everybody one last opportunity. Closing thoughts?
I'll start. Well, I appreciate the invite to come here and share what we've been doing as a service and as a Marine Forces Pacific. We look forward to, we're leaning in to the Indo-PACOM Mission Network and leveraging data-centric environments. We can't wait because we do want to be able to seamlessly share that data with our coalition partners. And we know that is going to be a game changer for us. So we're leaning in. We got both of our MEFs like chomping at the bit to kind of start putting these environments into experimentation. We participated at Bold Quest as users both in Camp Pendleton and Okinawa. And again, we just look forward to being able to leverage newer technology so that we can get ahead of the adversary. That's it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you all for your time and being here. I know that data centricity is a really tough issue or problem to solve, but I think just by listening from the questions and the contributions from everyone, I think we already have like some of the key things that we can start with, right? It's just a matter of communicating that up and then being able to articulate it in such a way that it will produce a product. So, from a PACAF perspective, we would love to hear about some of the great things from industry, if you guys can kind of help us, find our way to whatever that is, the fastest way to achieving that data centricity. We're all yours, right? Yeah, so thank you for your time, and thank you for SIA for allowing us to be here today.
Look, I'll just finish by saying, actually build on the point that I think it was Paul raised, and because I agree completely with what you're saying. I think what's important for us is, making this business as usual. And to do that, working out what those mission threads that we want to validate are, validate and fail on those mission threads now. It's better that we fail and learn now, enduringly, vice failing when it actually matters, when people are getting shot at.
Yeah.
So, let's build, let's validate, let's fail, so that when it really matters, hopefully we're failing less.
We would say the same. We talked about this earlier, but the persistence matters. So it can't be, okay, we learned from it, now we'll wait till Talisman Saber next year, Balakanib next year, Garuda Shield next year. We've got to leave that infrastructure in place, and we've got to constantly be learning and doing. And then we've got to update the standards. And then as we learn something new, we go, okay, wait a minute, we have to agree on this, you guys. Let's tackle that now. So I appreciate the time and look forward to meeting many of you later.
All right. That's all we have. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate the questions.
Thank you, Brenda.